It's 9 p.m. Do you know where your key fob is? Good evening, I'm Nate Benson, and I have not yet been replaced by AI. I emphasize the yet. On the agenda, we continue our series talking to the candidates for Buffalo Mayor with independent candidate Michael Gaynor. Can the community activist and business owner shock the establishment with a surprise win? Can his plans for more community engagement in city civics rally residents ahead of Election Day? Can he get voters excited about his vision for Buffalo? Can I ask any more questions in this lead-in? On the Agenda starts right now. Thanks for capping off your week with me. Independent candidate for mayor Michael Gaynor has been a community leader and business owner since moving to the Queen City 20 years ago. You've mostly seen him railing against the state DOT for the now delayed Kensington Expressway project as a member of the Eastside Parkways Coalition. As a member of the coalition, they successfully sued to stop the $1.5 billion Kensington Expressway tunnel project. Now he's shifting his focus on City Hall and running as an independent candidate after Senator Sean Ryan successfully kicked him off the primary ballot back in June. For the next half hour, you'll hear his vision for Buffalo that includes more community engagement. Let's dive right into it. City Hall has this perception amongst the residents of Buffalo, whether it be corruption, favoritism amongst developers or elite businesses. If you were elected mayor, how would you change that narrative inside City Hall?
Well, we have something in my campaign that we call a culture of care. And I believe that when it comes down to it, we're going to set the tone from the top down at City Hall. And, you know, I have the great opportunity of coming in as an outsider, as someone that has been working and focused in the neighborhood on neighborhood issues, working with our residents, working with our small business community, working with our not-for-profits, our philanthropy, our university sector to do things really differently. And I've done that. You know, we've brought a lot of new ideas to life on the neighborhoods. In the neighborhoods and all across the city. And I'm not beholden to anyone. I'm my own person. And I know what works. You know, what I've seen in my 20 years here in the city is how you can get things done in the context of a city government. And, you know, what it takes to launch a new idea, what it takes to change and transform a political community and a neighborhood community. And that kind of culture, right? Where we set expectations and we hold people to them, where people are in those positions because they have something of value to build. We are going to build a world-class team that is going to guide this city, all right, and direct it in a positive direction that brings transformational change to every neighborhood. And I think that when we come in with a respect for the people that work there, all right, but with an expectation that how we do business, all right, puts our residents first. It puts them in the driving seat. It mobilizes our communities to be involved in envisioning and driving the change that we want to see. And then we build the team to support that. And my leadership team and our administration is going to be the best that this community and the best that this country has to offer. And they're going to be in those positions because of those skills and that experience and that wisdom. And when we bring them here, that's the expectation. And then they create the culture in each of those departments. And that cultural expectation is how we address some of the issues that have held us back in the past.
Looking at downtown, we've noticed a pretty big shift in just the number of people downtown post-pandemic. You know, pre-pandemic, we saw downtown Buffalo was thriving to a certain degree, but now we see closed businesses, less people down here, less people working here. What would be your plan to bring more people back downtown?
Right. Well, I'm going to lean into some of the things that are already happening. And kudos to M&T Bank for the initiatives that they've spearheaded in the last year. They just had a great bike event in Niagara Square last weekend. Their fashion show runway that was on Main Street. We've got to lean into our strengths. We have a business community here that's really invested in this neighborhood. We have small businesses that are operating downtown, many of them that have been here for a while, and some new ones. You know, particularly the 500 block of Main Street. You know, we have the new International House, you know, right in the heart of the theater district, and entrepreneurs that want to see a vibrant and alive and active downtown. So we have to lean into those organizations and businesses. You know, A lot of those businesses operated over the last 10 to 15 years and then opened and closed their doors because they didn't have the support of of the government, right? They didn't have municipal support. We gave municipal support to other projects and initiatives, but the small and medium-sized businesses, the folks that are doing the work in the trenches every day, often get ignored. And we have to lean into that. We need to support them. And we need to support the visionaries. And we got to create programming that brings people to downtown, just like M&T has done over the last year. We did that, and we saw the success when Canal Side was getting started, where Buffalo Place was managing projects that scheduled 400 events the first year, that brought people to the waterfront. And now people come naturally to the waterfront. But the final point, Nate, and this is what's the most important, is how do we get people downtown? We invite more people to our city, and we bring more tourism to downtown. All right, I'm encouraged by Buffalo Niagara's vision for a nationwide marketing strategy to bring more tourism here, but we have to share that vision with more people. We need to invite, we are right here strategically located, very close to Niagara Falls, an international destination for tourists. And many of those folks drive right by our back door. And when they do that, they pass right by our cultural institutions and our water resources and our waterfront and all of our amazing neighborhoods and all of our amazing architecture and history, all of our small business communities that would benefit. If we capture 1/2 of those tourists for one day each year, that's $1.5 billion investment into our downtown community, into our commercial business districts, into our hotels, our restaurants, our small shops. All of those things benefit when we have a vision and we start to tell the world about Buffalo.
Crime has been trending down this year compared to years past. Quality of life crime is still a concern for the administration.
Right.
What's your public safety plan to make sure that trend downward continues?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The statistics are irrelevant. You know, I'm encouraged that, certainly violent crime is down. We've seen a decrease in homicides and in the city over the last year or two, and that's encouraging. But the hard part is, and the question that we really should be asking is, do people feel safe in their neighborhoods? Do they feel secure? Do they feel connected? Do they feel a strong sense of place? And, I've had the opportunity to be, the last few days down in South Buffalo, and it is a very strong sense of community. I haven't spent a lot of time there, but the people there look after each other. And they patronize their businesses there, and there's a strong culture and tradition of community. And what we need is to have that same feeling in every neighborhood. But not only that, even those neighborhoods feel like crime is out of control. Car burglaries, break-ins, all kinds of social service concerns. So we have to look, it's a big picture strategy, which we're going to talk about in this interview, that it's not something that has an easy solution. It really is a vision and a transformation and an approach that mobilizes all of our city departments, all of our communities, right, to focus on how to make each neighborhood feel more connected and feel more safe and feel more secure.
We're going to pause the conversation right there to take a quick break because we have to pay the bills. But first, a look at the weekend weather. Part of the issues downtown, though, are vacant lots, abandoned buildings, long neglected buildings, whether it be AMAs or the businesses within Main Street Mall, not to pick on them, but the Main Street Mall is not what it once was.
Right.
How do you plan to address those kind of blighted areas of downtown?
Right. And this is where it becomes a collective strategy, right? I don't think the city can do this alone. All of my initiatives and all of my efforts are about bringing more people to the table. How do we mobilize our partners at the county? How do we mobilize state resources to do best? And I'll tell you, if you look at downtown over the last 20 years, one of the great things that I can say about the Byron Brown administration is that we did transform a good many old buildings, right? And we did that using historic tax credits. We did that with brownfield remediation tax credits. So the buildings that aren't being converted right now are buildings that aren't qualifying for those tax credit programs. So we have to figure out other ways to incentivize those projects to make them work, because we need to have a concerted focus and effort on how to transform some of those commercial spaces into residential spaces. And we've seen it where the tax credit system has worked and has been leveraged to do some really transformational projects. So we have to be creative. We may have to talk to our state partners. We may have to create a new program, you know, that brings more tools and more resources to projects that right now don't fit those other criteria.
What would you do to ensure police officers are being held accountable for what they do? Obviously, we've seen incidents over years where that has come into question. Even recently, you know, there's been several police shootings or police-involved shootings.
Right.
How do you hold police accountable? How will you continue to hold police accountable?
Well, I think, again, this has to do with leadership, accountability, and you know, who is in the driver's seat in terms of our commissioners, and also the culture in which they exist. You know, I've met during this process over the last 6 to 8 months a good number of police officers and police chiefs, and the vast majority of them are doing the right thing, all right? When there's not accountability, it's because people know that there's not going to be, right, a high level of accountability or high level expectation for how that's going to all pan out. Maybe they get some paid leave, there is some internal affairs investigation, and then they return to the workforce. Like, we need to set the tone, all right, for what culture of care looks like. It looks like, you know, what it looks like is building trust between our police force and our communities. I'm really encouraged by the foot patrols. But our resource base currently, because of the burden of social service calls, homelessness, drug addiction, you know, these types of issues, right? We don't have the resources to put more people on the street. But walking the beat and building trust, right, between our communities and law enforcement is where we start. When you have trust, when you know people, when you know the local business owner, when you know the kids on the street, all right, you tend to approach them and engage with them in a different way. And that's the culture, and that's the example that we need to set. And that starts with leadership. The person that we choose as the next commissioner of police is going to be someone that comes in here and has a very acute attention to detail when it comes to expectations and accountability. And secondly, it's going to be someone that is able to, you know, share that culture and that level of expectation with everyone on the force.
Buffalo remains one of the poorest cities for its size in the nation, and the needle really didn't move over the last administration, the Byron Brown administration. It was in the top 5 when he took office, and it was still in the top 5 when he left office last October. What would you do to address this decades-old problem?
Well, I'm going to lean into some big picture solutions right now, which is, you know, we need to have a transformational view of how we're going to get things done here in the city. And I'll use the Kensington Expressway project as an example, because here is a project that isn't just a highway project, isn't just a neighborhood project. This is a city-wide project that has economic implications for the entire city, okay? You know, the reason we have concentrated poverty, the reason why some of our neighborhoods on the east side look the way that they do, is because decades of neglect, decades of divestment. That's not acceptable, you know, to me or the people that are around me and my team or to my administration. And we're going to change that, all right, by building the capacity of our neighborhoods, by investing directly into those streets. We're going to put our neighbors in the driver's seat of decision making and problem solving. We're going to start an initiative called City Action Corps that is going to educate young people that are out of school and out of work, doing work directly in the neighborhood that changes the way it looks, that communicates to those neighborhoods that people care, that there's an investment there. And when you do that, it changes the psychology of a place. People start to care for their homes because they realize, wow, the city is trying to make some change here. They're trying and caring about this neighborhood. And all of a sudden, people start to do the same thing.
City finances have dominated the headlines over the last year. We still don't know what the real damage will be. Could be 50 million, could be 80 million, all depends on a variety of scenarios. What will you do to fill the budget gap? What will you do to fill the budget gaps and raise revenues for the city if you're elected?
Well, I think that it's going to start with a team approach. I have lots of ideas, but I'm not a municipal finance expert. But we are going to build, all right, an unprecedented municipal finance team that's going to do the analysis, that's going to evaluate where we've been, and it's going to chart a path for where we go. I know the strategy is not incurring more debt, okay? I don't want to be saddled with debt. I'm a problem solver. I'm not a finance person, but you better believe I'm going to have the smartest people in the room, and they're going to be advising me. And then based on that analysis, we're going to make a plan and a strategy that embraces our resources, embraces our capacity, and helps us to leverage resources to get more done more efficiently. And that's where my role comes in. As a person that has been solving problems in this city, look at my track record. I started 3 organizations from the ground up with no resources, no backing, no funding, just committed people that were focused and determined to improve their neighborhoods and their cities and to launch an idea. That's the same kind of approach that I'm going to bring to City Hall. We're going to analyze each department. What are they doing? What do they need to be doing? And I've already begun that process, speaking to people at City Hall, speaking to people in the field, speaking to the people every day that are doing the work. They, like our neighbors, have the insight and the perspective into what works and what doesn't work, how we can be more creative, how we can cut costs, how we can save on overtime, where our Achilles heel is when it comes to service delivery, and where our opportunities are. And then we're going to figure out how to fund that. We're going to utilize the resources that we have, and we have to shift some things around. But I'm telling you, it's going to be a big picture transformation, because what we're doing, or what we have been doing, hasn't been delivering the results to the neighborhood that we need to see. And I've been on the receiving end of that. For 20 years living on the east side, I've seen how that neglect impacts neighborhoods. But there's so much good that's happening. We have to figure out how to leverage that good in every neighborhood to get more done, all right, without increasing our debt, while also staying disciplined and while holding the line on our spending.
City services are always a concern. Buffalo is known as a snow city, but in recent years, we've gotten the reputation of not being able to handle big snowstorms. If elected, how do you plan to improve our snow removal capabilities in the city?
Well, I grew up with a father that was the superintendent of highways in Harbor Creek, Pennsylvania. And I've also worked with youth crews that don't remove snow, but have done very tedious, very systematic, very scientific work, line work, where you have to be very thorough and where there's a protocol for how you do it. And then there's a method or operations that you go through to implement those best strategies. And I think that the culture at City Hall has really allowed. I had the opportunity to sit down with a previous head of Public Works, and he and I sat right at a coffee shop on Jefferson Avenue, and he pointed out all of the things that they weren't doing. Calling out veteran public service employees, saying they should know better. What it comes about to is really mobilizing a strong team, a leadership team, maybe bringing in consulting resources and training resources and professional resources to help bolster the skill set of the folks that we're doing. That's one part of it, the technical side, just being more focused on the work that we do and how we do it and the materials that we use to do it, and making sure that everything is up to snuff for what we need to accomplish. That's the first part. The second part is we have an inequitable distribution of city services. And I live in a neighborhood where there's 5,000 to 7,000 vacant lots that are owned by the city of Buffalo. They don't do anything in the way of snow removal on those sidewalks. And I have neighbors that are housebound. I have young children that are walking in the street to the school bus, all right, because the sidewalks are impassable certain days of the year. That is unacceptable. And we cannot tolerate that as a city where some communities it's safe and you can move around on the sidewalks, or you have cleared streets, and other neighborhoods don't.
What is it about you that sets you apart from politics as usual? What is it about you, your campaign, that should give voters in Buffalo hope for the future?
Well, I'm hoping that what people really notice is that I care and love of this city infinitely. Like, I moved here 20 years ago because I came here, spent 3 hours here, didn't know a soul, didn't have one person in the city of Buffalo that I knew. But I knew I needed to be close to Erie. So I came here and I experienced it. I took the bus down Genesee Street. I stopped at the Spot Coffee downtown, picked up a copy of the Art Voice. And like I do many times when I'm in a new place, I study the bulletin boards, I study the flyers. I try to figure out what's going on. And I ended up walking right down Elmwood Avenue where everything was happening, back in 2005, 2004. And I was just taken by the spirit of this place. By the way that people invite you in. They say, "You're thinking about moving to Buffalo? Oh, come in. Let me share with you what I'm doing. Let me take you on a tour of the neighborhood. Where are you living? Why don't you live with us?" Like, that actually happened. Like, I've lived all over this country and visited many different countries. And I've never had that type of spirit embrace me as an outsider before. And I think that that's what's special, is I bring a care and a hopefulness for the city, and I want to share it with other people. I want my care and hopefulness to give other people hope that it can be different. And I think that my track record and my history points to that. All of our efforts have been about building community. We've done it based on a vision, an idea, a hope, a challenge, and then we create an organism or an effort or an initiative that becomes transformational. The Buffalo Reuse Store is an example of that. It became a community, a place where people will get materials, but also education and get connection. It then became a mentoring space for young people, giving them training and opportunity to earn a wage and plug into a community and use that as a stepping stone to another training opportunity. The Foundry, supporting our small businesses, and finally, the effort to restore Humboldt Parkway. Let that be an example for how people can come together and influence the course of history. A David and Goliath story where the neighborhood rose to oppose a project that they did not believe in. They did not believe it was in their best interest, and they had a vision for something greater. Now that battle wages on, but you better believe that my learning from that, all right, is going to advise me and direct me for how we solve problems moving on. It's going to be about putting neighbors first. It's about a culture of care that invests in each neighborhood and invests in each neighbor. And we do it through these big transformational projects, and then we share it with the world. And we invite other people to be part of it, because that's how we address our long-term stability as a city and a municipality, is by having more people here to contribute to the health of our communities and the vitality of our communities.
That was our sit down with independent candidate for mayor Michael Gaynor. We do have a full special with all three candidates streaming right now on WGRZ+. This is normally the spot in the show where we bring you the Letters to Nate segment. But before I was so rudely interrupted by my own intro to the bit, I was going to say we're going to delay Letters to Nate for next week for the special Halloween edition of the agenda. We'll be digging into the archives to bring you tales of the supernatural here in Western New York, featuring some collaborations I did with Pete Gallivan, Dave McKinley, and myself. Collaborating with myself. One story I consider, by the way, one of my personal favorites.
It's been reported that a large meteor has smashed into the ground along the East River Road on Grand Island, setting off a series of fires. Several lives have been lost.
Remember, the news never stops on WGRZ+. Thanks again for watching. I'm Nate Benson, and we'll see you at the next one. Enjoying my coffee.